Pawn 5. Pawn 5.
Two men walked into a bar.
Pawn 5.
An hour later, one of them was dead.
One of these men was my great-uncle, Emil Tuyes.
The next day, the titillating details of the murder were front-page news. The two men involved in the crime, Emil Tuyes and Joseph Geyer, were prominent enough to receive this dubious honor of journalistic placement, not to mention portrait sketches. The gravest feature of Southern homicides, wrote law professor B.J. Ramage in 1896, lies in the fact that they are often committed by a class of persons one would least suspect of a crime, least of all of the crime of murder. People who have never visited the southern states but only read of these deeds of violence are not infrequently inclined to smile when the principals are referred to as members of prominent families or leading citizens.
Joseph Geyer, well known to saloon men all over this city, was shot and killed yesterday afternoon at 5:45 o'clock by Louis Emile Tuyes, a representative of one of the oldest Creole families in New Orleans.
A New Orleans newspaper stated that common arbiters of justice, the knife and the pistol, were the ways in which men settled their differences in this enlightened Christian age. The men of this city go back to the barbarous customs of the savage.
Pawn 5.
Emile was born during the Civil War. The entire Tuyes family moved to Paris for the duration of the war. When they returned to a violent, highly unstable, and almost bankrupt city.
Violence was rampant. Hardly a day passed that someone was not shot.
Emile grew up during Reconstruction, a very violent time. His father played an active role in trying to return the city to some stability, but that effort was unsuccessful, and he finally resorted to a violent solution. On September 14, 1874, the White League, an extra-legal paramilitary group, played out a well-planned uprising to take back what they called the stolen governor's election of 1872. An armed confrontation between 5,000 White Leaguers and 3,500 federally backed Metropolitan Police was fought on Canal Street, in the heart of New Orleans. The White League took over the city and state government for 3 days until the federal government intervened. Emile's father played a prominent role in this uprising called the Battle at Liberty Place. Historian Lawrence Powell points out that the identity of young white elites who came of age in Reconstruction New Orleans was shaped mainly by one stirring event, the Battle of September. The 14th of September became a symbol in the collective memory of New Orleans citizens for future generations. The street battle became the symbol of assertions of upper-class political entitlement, the assumptions of class and racial supremacy, the vindication of masculine virility, and, most of all, the legitimization of establishment violence in the name of good government.
Among those involved in the trial, 3 had been arrested for street fights or other kinds of disruptive behaviors that were reported in the local newspapers. Witness Charles Hale,
owner of the Little Diamond Saloon across from the scene of the crime, was arrested multiple times for disturbing the peace and gambling. He was also arrested for attacking a man with a knife. Edward Domedian, who ran the elite cafe next to Hale's saloon, was fined for his disorderly bar. Even the esteemed coroner, Dr. Lemonnier, was not immune to violent behavior. According to the Galveston Daily News, bad blood had developed between Dr. William Riley and Lemonnier after the governor chose Lemonnier as interim coroner. When the two men crossed paths and Dr. Riley failed to apologize after stepping on Lemonnier's foot, heated words were exchanged, followed by blows initiated by Dr. Riley. The ensuing fight left both men on the ground with Dr. Lemonnier in the inferior position, or so it seemed at first. When an attempt was made to separate them, it was found that Riley's nose was in Lemonnier's mouth.
Tuyes shot Geyer on the corner of Bourbon and Custom House Streets. He was immediately arrested and put in a cell. A reporter interviewed him the same night. He quoted Tuyes as saying,
"It was in the saloon that Guy spoke of my mother and dared me, I guess, to a fight. I went out and he repeatedly insulted me and I shot him. Is he dead? Well, since he is dead, I regret it as natural, but then he did what he think was right, and it is for me that I will do it over again if the same circumstance were to occur. I would do it if I got done for a deed."
Emil's justification of his actions smacks of privilege. The three questions I asked myself when starting the research for this thesis include: why did Tuyes feel justified in shooting Geyer? Why did Geyer's insults have such an extreme impact on Tuyes? To what extent was this crime representative of larger historical forces of that time? This thesis reconstructs the world of Emile Tuyes and Joe Geyer through newspapers, court documents, travel histories, and contemporary literature. In reconstructing their world, we come to find that their story does reflect larger historical forces. It reveals a local, national, and transnational story of a new meaning of manhood at the turn of the century that was not universally accepted. This idea of hegemonic masculinity, represented by an Anglo elite, was different from white Creole elite ideals of manhood. It also shows how race and gender played out on the streets. In other words, it shows the fluidity of race and gender.
A reenactment of the crime took place in New Orleans, on the neutral ground on Francis C. Norman Parkway, on October 8, 2023, exactly 126 years after the original crime. This is a small snippet of the reenactment. There is one disclaimer. Although Emile Tuyes' crime was serious, this reenactment is not.
From New Orleans. I go to the opera. I know cuisine. You smell like sausages and beer.
Herman Moser, a drummer for LL Lyons and Company, was passing along Custom House Street and reports.
That's you.
I was passing along Custom House Street and saw the two men in the middle of the street. The big man hit the little man with a folded up newspaper.
Boom. Take that.
Take that! Take this if you are a man.
Tuyes starts speaking excitedly and quickly in French.
Je ne parle pas français, je suis américain.
Step
Je
back
suis going
towards the
to shoot you.
electric light post. His right hand dipped into his hip pocket and he pulled out his revolver.
Uh-oh.
Geyer stood still and looked askance at the small man, whom he could have beaten down had he tried. Tuyes begins to fire. The first
Your
shot
arm has been shot. I didn't mean to.
pierces Geyer's heart, and the great mass of manhood toppled.
Boom.
First to his knees, Geyer fell.
Boom.
As he was falling, a second shot rang out.
Boom.
Prone on his face,
3,
his bolt
4,
quivered, and Tuyes
5.
emptied his pistol into his defenseless victim. 5 shots were fired all
It's
together.
all for art. She has sacrificed.